Welcome to the Gray Area Podcast, presented by Aura. My name is Kevin Gray. Thanks for listening today. You can find me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. Be sure to download and subscribe to the Gray Area Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcast for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. And if you're watching this on my YouTube channel, make sure you like and comment on the video and subscribe to my channel at Kevin Gray Sports. A lot to get to on this episode of the Gray Area Podcast. It's the end of an era for this Dallas Cowboy. Are the Mavericks in trouble? And my goodness, is professional wrestling cool again? But first, it was an eventful weekend in the National Football League as the NFL Combine completed in Indianapolis as teams look for their next generational prospects as we get ready for the NFL's annual selection meeting, of course, in late April, and there was no shortage of news coming out of Indy this weekend. And when it comes to, of course, the team that I cover here in Dallas, the Dallas Cowboys, and not because of Dak Prescott and whether or not he's going to get a contract extension, which has been the talk on the National Football League, and particularly, of course, the Dallas Cowboys as we get ready for the new league year, as we approach NFL free agency that will be coming next week, and whether or not the Cowboys will get a deal done with the former Mississippi State product, who, of course, could be in line to become one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the history of the National Football League. That's another conversation for another day. No, I'm not necessarily talking about, well, I kind of am talking about the idea that the Cowboys are supposed to be going, quote unquote, all in for the 2024 season. The problem is no one exactly knows what that means for the Cowboys. Neither does Jerry Jones or apparently Stephen Jones at this point either. By the way, shout out to them getting booed at the NFL Combine this past weekend as they got showed on the Jumbotron, or, of course, the Indianapolis Colts playing where the Combine was held this weekend. But that's all beside the point, because it may be the end of an era for Tyron Smith. Tyron Smith, who, of course, is going to be playing his 14th NFL season this upcoming year, it appears won't be doing it for the Dallas Cowboys. Multiple reports over the weekend suggested, beginning with Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network, that Tyron Smith and the Cowboys are unlikely to come to an agreement that will allow him to continue his career with the Cowboys. And, of course, Tyron Smith, who was a second-team All-Pro in the 2023 season, has played all 13 of his NFL seasons with the Dallas Cowboys, and appears his 14th won't be with the star on the side of his helmet. And you say, Kevin, Tyron hadn't played a full season since 2015 anyway. And I tell you, yeah, that's true. But at the same time, when Tyron Smith has been on the field, he's been healthy. And this past year, he looked as good as ever. As I mentioned, as a second-team All-Pro, available for, 13, 14 games this year. And, of course, was stabilizing the left side alongside Tyler Smith, who came along as well and is going to have a really terrific career for the Cowboys. But it's not just about Tyron Smith here that's got me all hot and bothered when it comes to this team. It's the continued confusion of the message that the Cowboys keep presenting to you and I throughout the course of this offseason so far, if you really give a damn about the Cowboys, to which, I kind of do. And for the Cowboys, look, they've won 36 games over the past 3 seasons, 12-5, literally each of the last 3 years, and got nothing to show for it. And then Jerry Jones comes out and says, hey, we're going all in for 2024, to which Stephen Jones says, well, if you believe Jerry, every year is an all-in year, to which we're looking at each other, staring at each other, proverbially, you and I looking at Jerry and Stephen Jones saying, what the hell are you talking about? Yeah, you went and got Stephon Gilmore and Brandon Cooks last year. Mike McCarthy took over the reins of the play calling for Dak Prescott, who 2 seasons ago led the NFL in interceptions. Last year turns it around and leads the NFL in touchdown passes, was second in MVP voting, and still may not get a contract extension from the Cowboys this offseason, which would behoove them to do because, yes, the salary cap has exploded, but at the same time, they'll need some additional relief, and they could do it by getting Dak Prescott's contract extension done. But again, that's something that Jerry, Steven, Todd France, Dak Prescott's agent, are going to have to figure out, and whether or not they truly are all in. Because maybe Jerry Jones's version of all in is this: put the pressure on everybody involved. We've learned that Mike Zimmer, the new defensive coordinator for the Cowboys, only signed a 1-year deal. Mike McCarthy is on the final year of his 5-year contract. Dak Prescott going into the final year of his 4-year contract extension worth $160 million. And maybe the idea of all in is, hey, if y'all don't figure this out this year, all of y'all are gone. Dak, Mike, all of you are gone, and we are going to start this whole thing over. To which I say, okay, that's fine if you decide to do that. But then when you decide not to bring back Tyron Smith and now putting the pressure on maybe having to find an offensive tackle with the number 24 overall pick in this year's NFL draft and possibly putting a rookie out at left tackle, I don't know how much that's all in when you've got a team that's kind of trying to win a Super Bowl right now. And oh, by the way, still has to pay CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons if they decide to do it this offseason. CeeDee Lamb is looking to be one of the top 5 paid wide receivers in the NFL. And oh, by the way, that dude in Minnesota, Justin Jefferson, may be looking at a contract that exceeds $30 million per season, becoming by far the highest paid wide receiver in the history of the NFL. And oh, by the way, boys and girls, Micah Parsons, who's had one of the best starts to an NFL career in recent memory, is in line for a contract extension because he's eligible for one and could become the highest paid defensive player in the history of the NFL. So decisions, boys and girls, have got to be made about what the Cowboys want to do. But if they do, in fact, decide to move on from Tyron Smith, it is definitely the end of an era. And what saddens me most is that he will be in a long line of terrific Cowboy football players that had their careers wasted and not be able to win a Super Bowl with this franchise. And the list is long and many. Whether it's DeMarcus Ware, whether it's Travis Frederick, whether it's Tony Romo, whether it's Jason Witten, whether it's Dez Bryant, any number of Cowboys that have been spectacular over the last decade and a half, especially for the way that they have been able to have their careers shaped and molded by playing with the star on the side of their helmet, will not see a championship with this franchise. And in big part, I blame the Jones family for it. Because here's the rub here when it comes to Jerry and Steven and the entire Jones family, regardless of how you feel about them. This is the family business. They're the Lakers. They're the Yankees. Any family that you can think of that has ran a team for decades, that is what the Jones family is. They are the most powerful family right now in the National Football League by virtue of the fact that they have the most valuable franchise, not just in the NFL, not just in North American sports, but in the entire world. That is what the Jones family has built, specifically with Jerry Jones. And yes, he's a Hall of Fame owner and a Hall of Fame businessman that has changed the trajectory of the way that the NFL is marketed and the amount of money that is pumped into this league every single year. And yet the biggest failure that he's had now for nearly 3 decades is not being able to produce yet another championship for the franchise that he has built as a bastion of success in the NFL. And that's his own football team in the Dallas Cowboys. And the only person that Jerry Jones can blame is himself. Having not gone in and not being able to balance the kind of team building that modern football teams do, whether it's building through the draft, which they've done a good job of for the most part, especially over the last decade, but not being able to bring in the kind of free agent names that will allow them to put themselves over the top. Here they are again, making bad decisions when it comes to Dak Prescott because they didn't extend him the first time when they had the opportunity to, when it was Jared Goff and Carson Wentz when they got their contract extensions way back when. And then when Dak Prescott's got his ankle dangling from his leg, then they decided to give him the $160 million, whether it was re-signing Michael Gallup, who had just torn his ACL, and giving him a multi-year deal. That was another bad decision, it appears, to the Cowboys, as they may be looking to move on from him this offseason as well. Say what you want about Ezekiel Elliott, who was a warrior for the Cowboys and who I advocated at the time to get his big-time contract. His contract became an albatross around the team's neck, and they eventually had to move on from him. Then they decided to franchise Tony Pollard, coming off of a broken leg that he suffered, of course, in the playoffs against the San Francisco 49ers. This was after the running back market had dictated to the Cowboys that you may not have to pay that dude $10 million to stick around here. And now they may see him walk in free agency as well. And now you have Tyron Smith, who is a guy that has done everything he possibly could to be the good soldier for the Dallas Cowboys that he has been for 13 years. He has given his body, his broken body, to be able to play for this team, whether it was taking a long-term deal, what was it, an 8-year contract to stick around for the Cowboys, rushing back to be able to get himself back healthy to play after suffering a devastating hamstring injury. Tyron Smith has done everything and then some to be what I consider this era's Mr. Cowboy. He has never complained. He has never wavered. He has never asked for anything but to be treated fairly and with respect. And I don't know what the conversation was like between Jerry and Steven and Tyron and his representation on how things broke down so quickly between the parties to where we got to the point that we would not see Tyron Smith potentially in a Cowboys uniform. There is a small window that may see these two get back together, but based on the way that things have been presented, it doesn't look likely. And again, the only people that can blame themselves for this is the Jones family. I laid out the amount of bad decisions that they've made over the years, paying the amount of players that they've played, coming off an injury, whether it was a good move or not. This team simply doesn't have the common sense understanding that sometimes you just got to catch the L. And sometimes that comes catching the L with the guy that you said was your franchise quarterback, and then you said after the playoff game was over with, well, the quarterback took us as far as he could take us. And yet you're in a position where you can't be trusted to find the next one going forward because you lucked into Tony Romo and somehow you found a 4th-round compensatory pick in Dak Prescott. All of this reminds me that the Cowboys have simply been inept when it comes to putting the kind of product on the field that has the longevity to get them the one thing that Jerry Jones has coveted since Jimmy Johnson left this team, which is a Super Bowl championship. And I don't know if Big Mike, Zimmer, or McCarthy in tandem will be able to deliver that to the Cowboys. And you say, Kevin, the Cowboys got a cultural problem. They got this, they got that. They talk too damn much. Everybody doing podcasts. Let me tell you something. All the distractions that come with being a Dallas Cowboy are ill compared to what this team hasn't achieved over the past 30 years. All of that pales in comparison to what they have not been able to succeed in doing. I don't care if Micah Parsons does a podcast. I don't care about the appearances that these players make because they have a star on the side of their helmet. All they need to do is win and win when it matters most. And all of that will be put to bed. But yes, as guys continue to not succeed in the playoffs, it amplifies the idea that they focus too much on themselves. They have these kinds of brands that don't allow them to focus on the task at hand, which is winning a championship. All of the criticism that comes with this franchise. And guess what? The person you can blame for all of this, in my humble opinion, is Jerry Jones. No matter what, positively, negatively, or indifferent, the Jones family wants you talking about their franchise, because if you are talking about them, if I'm talking about them, guess what that means? Big business. And it means money in their pocket. The marketing machine that the Dallas Cowboys are, they are Teflon in the world of sports. You know why? Because they built such a brand that is virtually indestructible. And that brand is being tested this offseason more so than many off seasons in years past, because now here's the thing. When you haven't been able to do the kind of winning that's expected to be of a franchise who believes a Super Bowl is their birthright, and you continue to be fraudulent in the playoffs, then we start not to believe you anymore. Then we start to tune out what you got to say when it comes to being all in. We start not to believe you when you say you're going to do this and do that, that you would write any check to win a Super Bowl to be the kind of franchise that does it. When you're the owner that will do anything it takes to win a championship. And then when it's time to put the money where your mouth is, you don't do it. And then you get the results that you get. And now here we are in an off season as dark as any, and we've just now hit March. That could get even darker if the Cowboys don't get it done with Dak Prescott, if they do actually move on from Tyron Smith, and the kind of change that comes with a franchise that's done the amount of winning that it has nothing to show for it. Here's who they remind me of. By the time we got to the end of the era with the Utah Jazz, the iteration that included Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, playoff failure after playoff failure, not being able to take themselves deep into the playoffs, they eventually had to tear the thing down and start over again. The Dallas Cowboys are to a point where they've got a decision to make if they don't ultimately achieve what they believe they should this year. Do you run it back yet again, or do you finally, Jerry and Steven, decide that you've got to tear it down? But here's the rub. No matter what, whether you win or you lose, guess what? You get to continue to line your pockets with money, because all we'll be able to do is continue to talk about the Dallas Cowboys. They've won. Whether they win a championship or not, they've won because they've built a machine that is virtually unbreakable, because they know that that all they want to do is have them be talked about all the time. ESPN, Fox, whatever, the Gray Area podcast, it doesn't matter. As long as the Cowboys are relevant relative to who they think they are, they'll continue to be in the spotlight, whether they win or they lose. So guess what? You might as well strap in and watch the drama that unfolds with the Dallas Cowboys, because regardless, they win, and they win big all the time, even if they don't succeed in getting the one thing that's eluded them now for nearly 3 decades. And that, my friends, represents maybe the end of an era one way or another. But the Jones family, no matter what, will live on. Speaking of Dallas, the Mavericks, the team that I cover, and of course, Mavericks pre- and post-game host on 97.1 The Freak on the Dallas Mavericks radio network, they might be in trouble. They've lost 4 out of their last 5 games after winning their previous 7 games and got themselves as high as 6th in the Western Conference. But right now, they're in a little bit of trouble. They lost by 4 at home on Sunday to the Philadelphia 76ers in a game that they probably should have won. And now they face the prospect of completing their 3-game homestand against the Indiana Pacers and the Miami Heat on Tuesday and on Thursday, before they got a couple of games on the road against the Pistons and the Bulls before welcoming in Golden State with Stephen Curry and then taking on the Denver Nuggets and the Oklahoma City Thunder. My point is, the Mavericks continue this up and down roller coaster of a season and now find themselves right now, as we speak, 8th in the Western Conference. And I don't know what they do, because what have I told you? If you listen to my other podcast, Inside the Mavs, or you've heard me talk about it here on the Gray Area, the Mavericks got to find a way to defend. And right now, that defense looks like boo-boo. You saw what they did during their 7-game winning streak. They were a team that was 2nd in the NBA in defensive rating. In the last 4 games leading up to the game on Sunday against the Sixers, they were dead last in defensive rating, and it didn't get any better after 120 points they gave up to the Sixers on Sunday. And now I'm looking at Jason Kidd with some side-eye thinking, hey, man, when they hired you the first time, I had some questions about whether or not you were actually good at this. And the lack of defense that this team continues to play, even though that's supposed to be Jason Kidd's calling card, has me bringing this team's coaching into question about whether or not Jason Kidd is actually the right guy to move this forward. I said last year, after the Mavericks missed the playoffs, even after making the trade from Kyrie Irving, last year was about the amount of step back that you could take in the Luka Doncic era, because A team that has a top 5 superstar in Luka Doncic, who's a perennial MVP candidate, literally been first team All NBA each of the last 4 years. He became just the 4th player on Sunday to have 3 consecutive 30-point triple doubles. You know the numbers that he's put up have been absurd. A 73-point game, leading the league in scoring, top 5 in assists. My man's even actually given a damn on the defensive end as a top 10 steals guy this year, putting together the kind of MVP-like resume that you would look at and you say, well, yeah, that dude looks like an MVP, but yet his team hasn't had the kind of consistent winning success that will allow him to stay in that top 3 MVP category. And right now, you can kiss that MVP talk probably goodbye for this season as well. Well, yeah, the Mavericks have had stretches where they've won 7 straight games. They are now in a stretch where they lost 4 of their last 5 games, and wondering now if this is a team that can be in position not just for the rest of this year, but going into the next year and beyond to be considered as part of the West, because they've seen other teams pass them on the way to getting to the top of the West. I'm talking about the Minnesota Timberwolves of the world, the Oklahoma City Thunders of the world, especially with a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who I would consider in the top 2 of the MVP discussion right now, alongside Nikola Jokic, whom, by the way, the Denver Nuggets right now are looking like the reigning NBA champions. They just beat the Los Angeles Lakers this past weekend, where your man Michael Porter Jr. went 10 of 10 from the field and 5 of 5 from downtown, and that wasn't even the most impressive performance in that game, because Nikola Jokic did absolutely everything and then some, and was the absolute closer with that 2-man game that he and Jamal Murray run in Denver, looking virtually unstoppable right now. Denver, it looks like they're starting to peak at the right time, and they've got the team that's obviously been there and done that to give you confidence that they could repeat as NBA champions. Boston is out here obliterating everything in their path. They've won 11 straight. They beat down the Golden State Warriors so bad that they beat them by 52 points. That game was 140-88, and Kristaps Porzingis didn't even play in that game. Boston looks like the best team in the NBA right now, obviously in the Eastern Conference. My point is, the Mavericks, for even the moves that they've made, getting PJ Washington, getting Daniel Gafford, don't still seem that close to being anywhere near the kind of contention that would put them in the conversation with the Thunder, with the Timberwolves, with the Los Angeles Clippers, with the Denver Nuggets, even the Phoenix Suns to a degree, even though they hold the tiebreaker over them. The Mavericks still seem that far away, and that for me is a little concerning, because as great and as much of a superstar as Luka Doncic is, and yes, they've made a Western Conference Finals appearance in the Luka Doncic era, it doesn't seem like they're any closer to competing at that level needed to give you confidence in the idea that they can stay in that top contention in the West for years to come. And I don't know how they get to it, because here's the rub with that. They've given up a lot of assets to take a lot of swings at trying to build a team around Luka that can be in that upper echelon of the West for years to come. And on the one hand, I applaud Nico Harrison, the general manager for the Dallas Mavericks, for continuing to take those continuous swings to try and build around Doncic. But man, have you given up a lot in order to do it. You really don't have control of several first-round picks for years to come, whether it be via pick swaps or picks that you've given away to acquire the likes of PJ Washington, of Kyrie Irving, pick swaps that you had to give up in order to make things happen. Hell, you still got to convey a pick from the Kristaps Porzingis trade, even though he's now on his second team since leaving the Dallas Mavericks, having played for the Washington Wizards, and of course now for the Boston Celtics. They still have that trade lingering over them as a franchise. So you get my point here. As much as Luka Doncic and now his superstar running mate and Kyrie Irving have done to increase the offensive ceiling, this team still can't defend at all, which brings it back to Jason Kidd for me. What are you here for at this point? If your teams can't defend and you can't get the most out of the guys that seemingly fits your roster composition based on the style of play with Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, and you can't get the most out of them, what are we doing here at this point? And for Jason Kidd, I guess that's the question he's got to answer. And I don't know if he can actually answer that question to the satisfaction of Mavericks fans who are impatiently looking at Jason Kidd with some side eye thinking, are you the right man for this job? And honestly, I'm kind of right there with them. Even when he had the success that he had in Milwaukee and to a degree in Brooklyn, there wasn't a lot of confidence that he could get the most out of that team. And eventually it went south in Brooklyn and in Milwaukee, where he had a superstar there in Giannis. And when you say Kevin, a lot of credit Giannis gives is to Jason Kidd for helping him grow and develop. But guess where he wasn't when Giannis won his NBA championship? His head coach. And even the renaissance that he had when he was in Los Angeles with the Lakers as the assistant coach to Frank Vogel when LeBron and AD won their bubble championship. And it gave the Mavericks the idea that maybe the learning that he had did in Brooklyn and in Milwaukee and then learning from Frank Vogel in Los Angeles could help Jason Kidd turn the page in his career and come back to a place that he was familiar with and be able to win in Dallas, especially with a budding superstar in Luka Doncic, and especially with the idea that both of them could share the basketball IQ of being Jason Kidd, a Hall of Fame point guard and an NBA champion, and imparting the knowledge and the player-like mentality to a Luka Doncic to help him grow and become the kind of player that we know is on a Hall of Fame trajectory already, and it simply has fallen flat to this point. And for the Mavericks, they've got a decision to make, probably obviously after the season. They've got a new ownership group. Mark Cuban is no longer the guy that's running things, if you ask folks around them. That is actually the governor, because he's not the governor of the team anymore, is the alternate governor. And now for Nico Harrison, who I guess Mark Cuban is his boss, but look, the hierarchy and the structure still leaves a little bit of clarity to be given, but I guess the way it goes is Mark Cuban runs the basketball operations, but Nico Harrison's a general manager. They work together. The point is, they've got to find a way, as much confusion as they have on the defensive end, to find some clarity when it comes to their front office structure, which I think is pretty much defined when you look at what they have with the Dumas family, Mark Cuban, and Nico Harrison as a general manager, who is, yes, running the basketball operations. In a recent interview, the Dumas family, who now owns the Mavericks, said that, look, Nico Harrison runs the basketball side of things. He's making the decisions. And the decisions that he's made, for the most part, have been making a lot of sense. It just hasn't worked out. I feel bad for him in some respects because Kristaps Porzingis, who has moved on, has played really well with the Boston Celtics. Jalen Brunson, of course, is an all-star with the New York Knicks, and we know how much the Mavericks fumbled that. So as much as they've done to try and build around Luka, they've missed on opportunities with Jalen Brunson in particular, which preceded the Nico Harrison era, to be fair, because it was Donnie Nelson and that group that for some reason decided to give Jalen Brunson the kind of deal that didn't make him a restricted free agent when the time came for him to be so, and he was able to walk to New York to go play with his daddy, Tom Thibodeau, and the New York Knicks, which has turned out to be a terrific move for him. And for Mavericks fans, while yes, most of them are over it, will always be something that they look at akin to what happened with Steve Nash when he eventually left and, of course, became a two-time league MVP with the Phoenix Suns. But all that's in yesteryear. The point now is, can Jason Kidd be the dude that makes the difference for this team? And right now, I don't know. But what they do have is a superstar in Luka Doncic, an NBA champion in Kyrie Irving, and 20-some-odd games to figure it out. Because if they don't, this offseason for the Mavericks is going to be one hell of an interesting one based on what they have in this roster and the lack of control of their future that is outside of it right now. But the Mavericks have got to find a way, because it doesn't get any easier, because Tyrese Halliburton and them boys coming in on Tuesday, and they can score a bunch of points. But I'm looking at Jason Kidd like, can you be that guy that turns this thing around? Because if you don't, There's a new ownership group that may look at you and feel like you may not be the guy, because guess what? They weren't the ones that hired you, Jason. And that is the ultimate point here. Jason Kidd is now working for an ownership group that didn't hire him. And most of the time, when you get a new group coming in, regardless if Mark Cuban is around, they may feel like if he's not getting it done, that they may need to make a change. And I'm sure they would obviously consult Luka Doncic, who that next coach would be, because anybody that comes in to coach Luka Doncic needs to be on the same page with the superstar. And that's one of the reasons why Kidd is still here right now. Guys like to play for him, which I guess is one of the big things if you're a player that matters most. Do you like the coach that you're playing for? But if that coach isn't getting results or sticking by guys who are struggling, Tim Hardaway Jr., doesn't necessarily matter. But that, to me, is the most interesting part of this discussion. This new ownership group isn't beholden to Jason Kidd. And if they feel like a change needs to be made, especially if it means keeping that superstar around to make sure that they have the kind of championship organization they believe they should have with that top 5 talent, Jason Kidd won't be here any longer, no matter how much he's done for this organization. Because right now, the way that this team looks under his watch, this ain't it. We'll see if the Mavericks can figure it out, as they got a couple of games on Tuesday and Thursday at the AAC before they take on the Bulls and the Pistons on the road. And then we'll see how the rest of this regular season goes. But Jay Kidd, hey, man, you got to figure that thing out here, man, in Dallas. Because right now, it ain't looking good for the Dallas Mavericks. Before I get out of here today, look, if you know me and if you've seen my timeline on Twitter, you know that I'm a huge wrestling fan, huge professional wrestling fan, big fan of the WWE. I've been to multiple WrestleManias. Favorite wrestlers of all time: John Cena, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Undertaker, Shawn Michaels. The best match I've ever seen in my life: Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker at WrestleMania 25, the 25th anniversary of WrestleMania. Of course, Brock Lesnar breaking the streak. I still don't believe that happened, that Brock Lesnar broke The Undertaker's streak at WrestleMania. I was there in Miami when it was the end of an era match between Triple H and Undertaker inside Hell in a Cell with Shawn Michaels as a special guest referee. I was there at WrestleMania 29 when The Rock and John Cena competed for the WWE Championship. I was in Miami, not just obviously for that WrestleMania that included that end of an era match, but also had John Cena versus The Rock, once in a lifetime, would never happen again. We knew it happened again anyway. My point is, I love professional wrestling. And right now, professional wrestling is as cool as it's ever been. And that's thanks to one man and one man only, as I'm sure you saw his 21-minute video the other day. That is Dwayne The Rock Johnson. I encourage you, if you got a spare 20 minutes, to go watch that epic promo that he had on Cody Rhodes, the Cody Crybabies, the Seth Rollins clown emoji, and everything else when it comes to telling the story of the Bloodline, how The Rock fits into it with Roman Reigns. And it looks like we're going to see The Rock and Roman Reigns team up against Seth Rollins and Cody Rhodes in night 1 of WrestleMania before Cody Rhodes takes on Roman Reigns for the WWE Undisputed Universal Championship. You said, Kevin, why are you talking about this? Because I want to remind you something. No matter how old you get, no matter where you go in life, there are certain things in this life that you hold on to that give you a sense of wonder, that can suspend your disbelief and put you in a place where it reminds you of the simpler times in your life. And for me, one of those things is professional wrestling. I will never forget watching the Monday Night Wars between WCW and what was the WWF at the time, which of course became the WWE. And of course, them winning did the WWE, the Monday Night Wars, and all the things that came with the Attitude Era with Triple H and Chris Jericho and Stone Cold Steve Austin, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, Kurt Angle, and all the guys and gals that were great, the Trish Stratuses of the world, the leaders of the world, and anyone that you can think of that represented the Attitude Era. And then the transition to the quote-unquote PG era, when it obviously started with John Cena becoming the face of the franchise for over 2 decades. All of this has been renewed and rekindled with the new generation of superstars that we see now. Whether it's a Bianca Belair, who's one of the most talented and most gifted performers in the WWE today, Seth Rollins, who has carried the company on his back, the return of CM Punk, Randy Orton, Drew McIntyre, the aforementioned Roman Reigns, who is at the peak of the business that we have never seen in our lifetime. Think about what the Bloodline and Roman Reigns have done over the last now, 4+ years. They have told a continuous story over episodic television, 52 weeks of the year for the last now 4+ years, and have taken us on a cinematic thriller that we have not seen told ever in the likes of professional wrestling. And the way that Roman Reigns, here's the way that I characterize Reigns today. My man fixed his teeth, put on a pair of Jordans, and has been a menace ever since. The growth from the suffering succotash promo to being the tribal chief at the head of the table, with even The Rock the other night in Arizona acknowledging Roman Reigns as his tribal chief. It just gives you the arc in which Roman Reigns has been able to take his character from where it was to it is now, aligning himself with Paul Heyman, making main event stars out of guys like Jey Uso, elevating Solo Sikoa, elevating Jimmy Uso as well. The story in which they have told over the last 4 years is something to behold and to marvel, and he has propped the WWE into what it is today, the billion-dollar industry that the professional wrestling world is, and it's been built on the back, at least over the last 4 or 5 years, with Roman Reigns in the generational run that he has been on. And he has taken me and a lot of us through the emotions of what it means to be a professional wrestling fan. And that is why I love it. That is why it's cool, because when you insert The Rock, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, the most electrifying man in all of sports and entertainment, and you infuse this version of The Rock, even past 50 years old now, with the charismatic nature in which he presents his character, whether he's a face or a heel, which means, boys and girls, a bad guy or a good guy, he is at the top of his game once again, and reminded me and us why he's arguably the greatest of all time, because the way that he spit the facts, the way that he presented himself and told you how much this means to him, and to tell Cody Rhodes, F your story, even in the face of Cody Rhodes having earned the right to be back at this position again after winning the Royal Rumble for a second year in a row. And the amount of response that you've seen, not just here in the US, but around the world. Professional wrestling is back, and it's cool once again, and it's fun to see as someone who has grown up loving the professional wrestling business. And I'm not just a fan of the WWE. Obviously, AEW has some of its cool stars as well, and you're seeing some of the best wrestling. The athletes of today's wrestling world are the best that we've ever seen. I would be remiss if I didn't mention a guy like Big E, who has become a fan favorite over the years, is now a former WWE champion. Want to make sure give him his flowers for what he's been able to do over the last several years, along with the New Day and the way that they've revolutionized tag team wrestling along with the Usos over the last 10+ years. All of this to say is, whatever that is for you, whether it's sports, movies, books, professional wrestling, the reminder of what it is that you love can be found anywhere. And for me, being able to see professional wrestling back on top, being able to see it be brought to the heights that it's been brought to because of the tremendous story, no matter how much I've disliked Roman Reigns, no matter how much I've loved Roman Reigns, and the amount of ebbs and flows. Oh, yes, I know people are going to be listening to this and say, Kevin, how could you not mention Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens and the story of them being intertwined with the tag team championships and the elevation of Sami Zayn being able to be on the main event WrestleMania stage, Cody Rhodes being able to be that close to winning the Universal Championship after being away and returning as the prodigal son, and all this. Look, all of that is there. Trust me, I watch. I know. So I wanted to make sure that I cover my bases there. And also with NXT, tremendous stars there too. Carmelo Hayes on his way. Trick Williams on his way. Watching Tiffany Stratton do her thing now. NXT is on its way. They're going to be just fine. Jada Parker, too, by the way. Yeah, she's on her way. The point being, I love wrestling, as you can tell. But for me, watching it come back to the pop culture that it is, and that's the big reminder. The overarching thing I'm getting to in all of this here is the way that wrestling is woven into the fabric of pop culture, no matter if you're a fan of Ric Flair, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, Chris Jericho, Triple H, Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker, Kane, whomever you want to name as your favorite professional wrestler from the WWE or from yesteryear. Wrestling is woven into the culture of American pop culture, and you've seen the way that it's taken shape over the last 30 plus years. I wish I could articulate it that much more, because there's a sense of wonder that has come with the iterations and the way that professional wrestling has changed throughout the business, with the way that it's presented on television, the way that we used to revere and remember the DXs of the world, obviously with The Undertaker and Kane, the Brothers of Destruction, and everything that you can remember about it. Being scared that actually The Undertaker was out here messing up people, putting them 6 feet under and all this other stuff. That is what professional wrestling is all about, taking you on a ride that really not much else can do so. And guess what? It's back, and it's back better than ever. The superstars of today's wrestling, as I mentioned, the Roman Reigns, the Seth Rollins, the Rocks, the CM Punks, the Drew McIntyres, all of them, the Becky Lynches, the Bianca Belairs, the Rhea Ripleys of the world, who have taken the women's division by storm. Rhea Ripley is a megastar. You saw the reception that she got in Perth when she was able to retain her women's championship against Nia Jax. She is an absolute megastar in this business. All of them deserve to have their flowers based on what they're doing right now for the world of professional wrestling, and reminding me and reminding all of us that we were once kids who loved this stuff. And no matter who you are, I don't want to hear professional wrestling is fake, this, that, and the third. You watched it, you loved it. Now you get to relive that love and have it rekindled all over again, because professional wrestling is cool. That is it for this episode of the Gray Area Podcast. Again, appreciate our sponsor of today's podcast, in Aura. If you want to, make sure you download and subscribe to the Gray Area Podcast wherever you get podcasts for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. You can also like and comment on this video as well, and subscribe to my channel here at Kevin Gray Sports. I'll be back on Wednesday for another episode of the Gray Area. It'll be Interview Wednesdays, where we'll have a guest on the show as we get that much closer to the NFL free agency period. We'll see what the Cowboys do. Mavericks continuing the action, NBA, all kinds of, got plenty of stuff to talk about here on the Gray Area Podcast. Again, appreciate you joining me here on this episode of the Gray Area. You can catch me on every Mavericks pre and post game broadcast on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network, 97.1 The Freak, as the Mavericks pre and post game host for all Mavericks games. Again, my name is Kevin Gray. This has been the Gray Area Podcast. I'll talk to you on Wednesday. Peace.